I spent probably 4.5 hours in this guy's apartment that day, and it changed my life. Like, everything I had been shown was brought into question. Like, if you took the line you just played and Elvin Jones played it on his drums, what would it sound like? How much nuance would that have from a rhythmic and articulation perspective? You know, when you're practicing something, how many different ways can you practice it?
What's up, everybody? I'm Kyle Winjack, and I'm here with my roommate and professional saxophone player, Patrick Smith. So Patrick and I are going to talk about a bunch of different things today: touring, studying with Mark Shim in New York, great tenor saxophone player, mental health and avoiding burnout as a musician, and all sorts of stuff. So that's coming up right now. So Pat, why don't you talk about how you first found out about Mark Shim, a little bit of the backstory of how you met him, how you first came to seek him out and to study with him, and what you've learned from him.
So, for those of you who don't know Mark Shim is, in my opinion, I would say the most unique, and I would even go so far as to say the greatest saxophonist, in my opinion, on the planet right now, playing within the Black American music tradition. How I first heard about Mark was I was in my first year of university, and somebody was playing a recording of the Steve Lehman octet in the student lounge. And I heard this saxophone solo, and I didn't know the people there. I was new. This was in the first month or two of school, and I just stopped. I'm like, who is playing that solo? What saxophonist is this? And the guy who was playing, a great guitarist named Mike McCormick, who's now in Norway. He said, "Oh, that's Mark Shim." I'm like, okay, cool. And it was on a track called No Neighborhood Rough Enough. And I acquired that album, and I checked out that track when I was 18 and then forgot about it. I forgot about it for about 3-4 years. And then Mark's name came up again when I finished university. I'd been playing a Yamaha saxophone all the way through, a pretty standard saxophone. And 2 months out of university, I decided this was not the saxophone for me. So I bought, kind of on a whim, I tried it and I loved it, a vintage Conn saxophone from the 40s that not a lot of people play. Most people play more modern horns. These are hard instruments to really develop a voice on and to really execute in tune, in time, and cleanly. So initially, I really had to make some serious adjustments. Like, it was like I couldn't, after 4 years of music school, I couldn't play this instrument I'd spent all these hours on. So I was relearning how to play in tune. It was a totally different approach at first. So while looking into professional musicians who play Conns, and I really couldn't find too many in Toronto who played Conn saxophones as their main horns, I discovered this name, Mark Shim, and I started checking him out. And once again, I was like, oh yeah, this is that cat from No Neighborhood Rough Enough, the Steve Lehman octet record. And I just was blown away. I was obsessed with. He doesn't have that much music out there. There's a number of recordings, but he's been such a prolific and underground sideman. He's not on social media, which is why I really do feel like I would like to introduce people to this amazing artist. And I got his email, which is a hard email to get. I found somebody who had studied with him, and they were pretty reluctant to give me Mark's email because they were like, yo, I know you went to U of T, this guy is next level as a musician. As a teacher, he is one of the hardest. It's intense. Are you sure you want to do this? And I thought, yeah, I'm sure. So then I got his email, and he said, yeah, okay, we'll do a lesson. Come over to my apartment. Here's the price. So I get on the night bus to New York, 12 hours there, crash at a friend's apartment in Harlem. And I remember I was so sick, and I go to this guy's place. I'm 2 hours on the train. I'm dosed up with cold medication, and I walk in, and I've been idolizing this guy for months. And I sit down, and he's asking me, okay, playing triplets over this blues track. And I do it, and he stops me. And it's, okay, do this here's a metronome at 30. That's beat 1 at the bar. Improvise triplets over a blues. And it became very clear that my timing abilities were not up to the task of doing that exercise. And he stopped it and he sat me down, and I spent probably 4.5 hours in this guy's apartment that day, and it changed my life. He sat me down and said, what we're doing here when we play the saxophone, when we play jazz, like, this is a rhythmic music, and reeds naturally, of all the instruments that kind of play this music, they're the least designed to effectively play rhythm. Like, the saxophone's really good at playing smooth. It's not that designed to play complex rhythms with incredible accent. And if you listen to Mark's playing, it's like just out of this world from a rhythmic perspective. So he showed me a bunch of stuff, and mainly the idea of really getting inside the ability to cleanly articulate triplets and quintuplets over basic forms, like improvising lines using triplets and quintuplets. I thought we were going to be done after the hour, and he said, you don't have to be anywhere, do you? I'm like, no. Okay. Then we're not done yet. It's like, okay. And then he showed me some stuff with odd meters. And so by the end of the lesson, these 4.5 hours, I had bought a mouthpiece off the guy, the same mouthpiece I still use. I'd given like the last of my American cash for the trip to this mouthpiece because I couldn't e-transfer him because I have a Canadian bank and I didn't have PayPal at the time. And I just had my mind blown. Like, everything I had been shown was brought into question. It's like, okay, this is a completely original way and different way to look at everything I'd ever thought about in regards to sound, in regards to rhythm, in regards to changing things up and not really believing the status quo of things. Like, okay, you're a jazz saxophonist, you practice this. Like, Mark's totally always changing what he's working on and his setup, and he's trying to find his sound, and he's really effective at sounding like no other human being on the planet. It's absolutely insane. So the main thing I got out of working with him was just this conception of you need to truly, truly understand rhythm. And, that is something like you yourself, Kyle, you've worked on a lot. And I had just been such a sax nerd and just a prolific sax nerd practicer. My rhythm, I kind of was reliant on really good drummers, and I'd been told, you should use less tongue, you like play more smooth, specifically by teachers. And Mark's looking at me, he's like, no, it's about tonguing less hard but tonguing more. Like, you're trying to imitate a drum set. Like, if you took the line you just played and Elvin Jones played it on his drums, what would it sound like? How much nuance would that have from a rhythmic and articulation perspective? And the answer is way more. So then, after that, I lived in Copenhagen for a month and just had access to this practice space and just relearned some really basics of time, and came back, and it was like my entire playing and concept had changed. And then I'm still working on this stuff, all this stuff Mark has given me. Like, I've gone down 3 separate times now to get some extended afternoon long lessons with him, and each time it's incredible. He's a master of sound synthesis, and he plays a wind controller, which is the counterpart to the iwi, and he's just one of the most world-class people at developing sounds for it. I really encourage every serious musician to check out what this guy Mark Shim is doing on recordings, because it is out of this world. He's not on social media. He's not spending any marketing budget on advertising himself the way you would see, other New York saxophonists do. But he's just unbelievable. Like, he is. I'd owe so much of what I'm doing to particularly that first lesson. And as I'm leaving his apartment, he just says, he's like, yeah, man, don't be afraid to move on, like, from anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, as I'm leaving, putting my shoes on, he's saying this. He's like, don't be afraid to move on from practice habits, gear, relationships. Like, don't be afraid. And that has really stuck with me whenever you feel like, oh, I need to do this because I've done this for a while. It's like, well, like, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the unknown. Like, as artists, we have to get to that unknown, and we have to embrace the fear of going there. Right. So that's sort of tangent, but of appreciation for the great artistry of Mark Shim.
Wow.
As a teacher I've had.
So you mentioned that he had you playing through tunes using only triplets. Does he use that sort of practicing within self-imposed limitations in other ways? If so, if you wanted to share any other specific exercises that you did with him that you found helpful, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I haven't really gotten into this yet, but he was big into programming tracks that go through a bunch of meters where the drums are randomized. So it's not the same drum beat every meter, like it's switching. It's basically, programming Taishan, sorry. And it's really useful for odd meters and trying to break it up. So one of the exercises that you really concretely talked to me about was, okay, you've got these quintuplets. You've got to be able to, out of nowhere, like start your phrase on the third quintuplet. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you've got to be able to so accurately feel this and have it come out of your horn in a percussive manner, because it's so easy to just go tega-dega-da, right? Instead of actually being able to, within the quintuplet, pick out these spots and truly, like, how deep can you go into this thing? And same with triplets. I mean, like you're well aware of how deep you can go into triplets and how that improves your time feel. So at one point I was asking him about this articulation thing. I'm like, what do you mean about using more tongue but less hard? And then he was talking about how, he listens to a lot of trumpet players. He's not that into listening to saxophone players, and listening to trumpet players, especially Clifford Brown, Freddie Hubbard, like the realm of articulation. So I lifted, after thinking about this, and remember, he pulled up this thing. He pulled up a bassist on Instagram, and he's not on social media. Like, on his laptop, he's on Instagram. He's like, okay, check this out. I was just looking at this. And it's an electric bass player playing the Coltrane solo on Moment's Notice. Where if you listen to that solo, Train's not tonguing too much in that solo. There's, But then he's like, listen how this sounds on an electric. Like, listen to the amount of articulation on this. And I just had never even thought of that before. It's like, oh, yeah, like I take that approach. So I ended up going and doing 2 Clifford Brown transcriptions and really trying to articulate them every way possible. Like for Mark, it's less about like, okay, tongue the way Clifford does, but think, okay, how many ways can you articulate this? And he pulled up a Charlie Parker Omnibook thing on his laptop and was like, okay, like if I'm going to look and see how I articulate this line, this is pretty basic, but I can articulate it like this. And then he played 10 just brilliant renditions of this bird line. Conceptually, that really shifted my thinking in regards to practicing the saxophone. Like, and then within practicing these triplets and quintuplets deeply at various tempos and thinking, okay, how many different ways can I articulate ideas using these weird divisions that aren't 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And that just opened up how I was hearing things. A simple concept, but it goes really deep. When you're practicing something, how many different ways can you practice it?
Yeah.
From truly a rhythmic perspective, not from a scalar perspective of, okay, and now I can put this chord on top of this, I can put this chord on top of that, where like your metric divisions are still sitting so evenly.
Right.
Or even in the midst of, saxophonic craziness, there should still be rhythm. Mm-hmm. Right? Like there should still be like right? Like when I'm playing now, I really think like, okay, if Tony Williams were playing this on a snare drum, like these crazy long lines I'm doing, how much nuance would be in his articulation? Can I get that through my fingers and my tongue and my lips?
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like he really has a rhythm first sort of approach to the horn. It's really about being comfortable on each subdivision equally and being able to switch between subdivisions.
Yeah, totally. And switch, like you're doing 4 bars over a blues of triplets, then switching to the quintuplets and back. You can work on that for your life to do it effectively.
Yeah. Something that I found really helpful for getting that sort of thing ingrained is practicing Soca Tube. It's like an Indian percussion practice where you use hand gestures and you vocalize the sounds of the drums. I have a book that I practice out of, The Art of Soca Tune Conical. I think you borrowed it for a little while.
Yeah, that's a great book. Everybody should get this book. This is I was talking to Thomas about this book yesterday.
Yeah.
Thomas is a great singer, producer, friend of ours, and he's also going to be on this podcast.
Yeah. We've already filmed that episode. We're going to talk about philosophy as it pertains to music and a bunch of bunch of cool things, Apollonian and Dionysius.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't even know what that was before he told me that he wanted to talk about that. I'm like, oh, I better do my research. So yeah, it turned out well. That'll be coming up on a Wednesday near you.